Where's to Helm and welcome to yet another video. You can really consider this to be yet another episode of The Lord of the Rings, the books versus the movies, which is a video series of mine on my YouTube channel, in which I take a scene or a passage from The Lord of the Rings books and then compare it to one of the Peter Jackson's movies and then say what was changed, what was added, what was deleted, what was omitted, and then ask you, my friends, if you prefer the book version, the film version, or if you like the both of them. Now, I have been asked by my viewers a couple of times to talk about the Hobbit movies, and instead of making several videos about that and making them into a series, I just decided to talk about the Hobbit movies in general. Now, there are several points of view from which we can approach the Hobbit films. I shall, of course, approach it from my own point of view, and if you have been following my channel for quite some time, you know that I am a lifelong Tolkien fan and that I will always love the books the most. It's like they are the first for me. First and foremost, I think about the books. If I have the chance, I always reach for the book. And I also belong among the people who are not very fond of adaptations in general, full stop. If there's something that was first a book, I'll read the book, like The Lord of the Rings. If something was a movie first, like Star Wars, I will always prefer to watch the movies than, for example, or read a comic book or a novel. Although I do enjoy some of the older novels from the expanded universe. If something was first a comic book, I'll read the comic book instead of watching the millionth, billionth, gazillionth version of film Spider-Man. But even I have to admit that adaptations happen. And if we make an adaptation, it is necessary and obvious that changes will occur and changes will happen. A scene or two needs to be omitted. A scene or two needs to be changed. Something will be added to either fit the very different medium, because those two media are very different, books and film, or a TV show. It's absolutely understandable. Or more things will change. Now, of course, then there is the difference between making slight adjustments or bigger adjustments or changes and then crapping on the source material in general, in a big scale, which is something that it appears Amazon is doing to the name The Lord of the Rings, because they're absolutely not adapting anything that was written by Tolkien. Now, Peter Jackson and his The Lord of the Rings films that were released at the beginning of the new millennium are a different question. He made a lot of changes, yes, but he approached the movies as a man who wanted to honor Tolkien. You can find many quotes by Peter Jackson himself on the internet. He had dialect coaches to advise the actors and the writers, the screenwriters, Peter Jackson, Philippa Boyens, Fran Walsh, with Elvish and other languages. He was trying to stick to the original source material as much as possible. And of course, because he also is a creator of himself, and a director and a filmmaker, he changed a couple of things. I've already released a couple of episodes of my The Lord of the Rings, the books versus the movies, where I basically say that yes, those changes were made, and I don't really like them. I mean, I like them, but I prefer the book version. But they're okay, because they fit the medium of the film, and they are not breaking the law. That reminded me of a Judas Priest song. Alright. So the first episode was the Battle of the Helm's Deep, right? In which the elves helped the Rohirrim in the films. Didn't happen in the book. Our second video was about Tom Bombadil, the omission of Tom Bombadil from the films. Wouldn't really help with the pace of the movie if they added Tom Bombadil. The third episode, I believe, was about Anduril and the fact that Aragorn didn't have it from the very beginning. that they didn't reforge it for him in the Fellowship of the Ring, and only in the Return of the King. Well, these had two reasons as well. You can check it out. And then there I talked about the Mouth of Sauron. But the Hobbit movies, they are specific in one thing, I think. And first, I have to say that I don't really like them. I'm not a fan of the Hobbit films. I liked the first one, parts of it. And I liked just a couple of scenes from the second and the third movie. Now, bear with me. Be patient, please, or be nice, because I haven't seen the films in a while. I don't feel the need to rewatch them. What I think happened, and, why they are not as good as the Lord of the Rings films, there are a couple of reasons. The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, the books, are a completely different thing. Whereas The Hobbit is a children's book that Tolkien wrote specifically for children, his own children, so he can read aloud, or read it aloud to them. It's really a kid's book about an adventure. At the very beginning, at its conception, it was not supposed to have anything to do with his grander work, with Arda stories, with the Silmarillion, the Lord of the Unfinished Tales. Nothing. The Lord of the Rings, on the other hand, is an epic adventure, an epic story that is told on over 1,200 pages, and that was written as a sequel to The Hobbit, but already was written as a part of Tolkien's greater mythology of Arda and, Middle-earth, Air, so on and so forth. And he himself said that he wanted to try his hand at writing a stupendously long narrative that would hold the attention of the reader for a considerable amount of time. So from the conception, from its very beginning, those two books were completely different. And Peter Jackson, I think that he wanted to repeat his success that he had with The Lord of the Rings when he was making The Hobbit. I think that he was trying to make the second Lord of the Rings trilogy. And that was the problem. That was where he went wrong completely. Because it's not like Star Wars. It's not like, George Lucas made the first 3 films and then he wanted to make, the other trilogy. So he made 3 new Star Wars films. The Lord of the Rings, as I said, is 1,200 pages long. Over that, right? Well, The Hobbit is just like that thick, right? And he made it into 3 films of the same length as The Lord of the Rings. Plus there are, of course, extended editions. That was the first mistake. The second mistake is the atmosphere of the films. I think that the atmosphere of the Hobbit film reflects the atmosphere of the book the best in the first half an hour of the film, before Bilbo leaves the Shire, if we don't count the prologue, because it's really like a fairy story, or the atmosphere is very fairy story-like, and not at all like epic story-like. We see from the very beginning, lines that were as if they were taken from the beginning of the book itself. In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure, and so on and so forth. It was very beautiful, very beautiful. Of course, Sir Ian McKellen, come on. That was one of the other successes that The Lord of the Rings had. Tremendous cast, awesome actors. The Hobbit had awesome actors as well, but they were not enough to save it. And then those things that he added. The problem of the Hobbit films were that Peter Jackson added too many of his own things, made up things. And whereas I was willing to forgive him for this in The Lord of the Rings, because there were not as many of them, I just couldn't help it in The Hobbit. And there you can see that the more changes you make, the worse, actually. You need to find the line. And in The Hobbit, Peter Jackson, unfortunately, he crossed the line. The addition of Radagast. Alright, yes. He was in the Unfinished Tales. He was in the appendices. He met Gandalf on his journeys. Yes, yes, yes. They talked about him with Saruman, things like that. All right, that's fine. And the actor McCoy, I think, no, was a Star Wars character. What's the name of him of the actor who played Radagast? Let me know. He played Doctor Who. He's great. All right, fine. But once they started adding things like Tauriel, I know why they added her. They needed a strong female character. They needed a female character in The Hobbit. But yeah, you know, it just didn't fit there. She didn't fit there. Not Legolas. We knew why they added him, to make a link between The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. He wasn't supposed to be there either. They made Thranduil into a goth elf sex symbol. Not really how he was portrayed in the book. The portrayal of Thorin Oakenshield, I always imagined him to be an old, grey-bearded dwarf, you know? Like a old, seasoned papa dwarf. He was a sexy Richard Armitage. I mean, yeah, he was cool. After all, I've got... This is just a box. It's displayed somewhere around there. I've got The Hobbit, the key to Erebor replica. You know, it was a good film. And I'm not complaining about the weapons and the armor and the props. It was made by Weta Workshop, and Weta Workshop are the masters at this. But there's another thing that's connected with the effects. They used less practical effects and more CGI than they did in The Lord of the Rings. The biggest example is the orcs and the goblins. Whereas in The Lord of the Rings, they were all masks. In The Hobbit, they were all CGI. And the addition of this entire Azog the Defiler storyline wasn't even supposed to be there, because he had already been dead when The Hobbit happened. And that was a bit too much. I know they needed some... they needed a sub-story, because they wanted to make it epic. Because just sending 13 dwarves, and a hobbit, and a wizard, to an adventure to reclaim a stolen treasure from a dragon, that would be, what, too childish? Would it be too fairy story-like? Would be too fairy story-like, but it would be awesome. So I think that if they stuck to the story, if they didn't add too many things, and if they made one movie, The Hobbit, there and back again, and if it was made by Peter Jackson, I think it would be awesome. There was some fan cuts versions on the internet, I think, where they cut off from the film all the things that didn't belong there. I haven't seen it, but I think I might check it out to save some time. I, of course, loved the way they portrayed Smaug, as far as the CGI goes, and Benedict Cumberbatch provided the voice. There were things that were good. Bard the Bowman, he should have had just a bow. And I'm not sure I remember correctly, but what did he use in the film? Was it like this gigantic siege crossbow, or whatever you call it? Forgive my lack of medieval weaponry vocabulary right now, but and I've run out of my monster right now. So I've just provided you with a list of things that I think are the most common changes that people don't like about the Hobbit movies as opposed to the book. But the final thoughts are, there is a thin line, a very thin line, between making an adaptation and making a disaster. And The Hobbit is not a disaster. It is an adaptation, which of course I think will end up like Star Wars the prequel trilogy did. I was a fan from the beginning. I grew up watching these films. 1999 was The Phantom Menace, was the first film I went to see in cinemas. I was 6 years old, alright. But a lot of people didn't like them. And now, when Disney made their sequel trilogy, it seems that people are willing to forgive the prequels everything, which I'm okay with, and I think that The Hobbit is going to end up the same. When people, or it's happening even now, people are seeing what Amazon is doing, suddenly The Hobbit is not such a problem. And I'm okay with it. I mean, I always like to watch the first film, The Unexpected Journey. I will of course always prefer to grab the book, but if I were to watch a Hobbit film, I would watch the first one. Or some sort of fan cut version of it. So these are the finishing thoughts. Peter Jackson went a bit over the line, and Amazon is far away, far behind the line. Like miles and miles and miles in the space. So yeah, what do you think, my friends? What do you think about the Hobbit trilogy? I think it's complicated. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. And that will be all from me. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, Namarie.